Episode 2 of Incision is probably the most lore-heavy of the three, and features the most revelations about the nature of the villains in this game. There will be a lot of important information dumps in the bestiary descriptions, and a lot of cryptic lore bits as well. That being said, before we jump in, I want to address a few things from the last video. First of all, the creator of the soundtrack to Incision left a comment to make it clear that the meaning behind different face, same faith is in reference to the second feral armament fight and nothing else. Also, while watching back the footage, I noticed these two skeleton amalgamations down in the crypt. This would imply the throne did create more composite beings than just the firstborn during the cult's operations, which is not what I initially thought. I also wanted to clarify that the bestiary is unlocked when finishing the entire game, and I would suspect the descriptions are written with the assumption that you'd have experienced all 3 episodes. This is why I'm skipping over some of them or cutting parts out. I also want to stress that I do not know everything there is to know about this game. The game doesn't track what lore bits you have read, nor could I find any video or guide for them all. I'm exploring the levels pretty thoroughly, and I'm looking through all the secrets, but I could be missing some for all I know. Also, I somehow forgot to mention the episode names, because they're not particularly enlightening, and also there's at least one level in each of them bearing the same name. For completeness sake, the first episode is called Death-Cult Vestiges, the second one is Death-Filth Medicine, and the final one is Deathstorm Havoc. The cutscene hitting off episode 2 is a montage of various shots. Not necessarily in this order. We see the crumbled city covered in growth, but something is different this time. It's connected with red tubes up to something in the sky, and the haze is grey, as opposed to red. A few shots of more malevolent beings, and some organic looking creation, as if in a test tube. This spud ends up growing a blade, just like the one of our protagonist. Another being has just been rebranded. This gives them a vision of Healer, whom also receives an impulse, and wakes up in a dark cave. So the first level begins, Harvest Vivarium. According to Cambridge Dictionary, a vivarium is a container, often with a glass front, in which small animals, especially small reptiles, are kept as pets or so that they can be studied. However, the word harvest suggests the purpose is different from a normal vivarium. This level name already tells us something of what is happening. Whatever location we're in now is a part of the city that has been separated from the rest by someone, possibly the Malicans. The description reads, "My mind is in a haze. Was I transported somewhere? No, I can't stop and question it all. If the throne is still alive, I must keep moving. As the firstborn died, I felt my body and mind shudder uncontrollably. A screaming urge, a wish, for death filled my mind. I failed once. This cannot happen again." This tells us something has changed with the death of the firstborn, and it's affected Healer as well, since he is a creation of growth now after all. This change we shall see very shortly. Starting off in another cavernous burial site, we kick our way through some weakened walls and welcome Kitty again. A cavity we must traverse is now filling with the same darker, pulsating, dripping variant of growth that saps our health. A nearby lore bit draws attention to this apparent chemical reaction. The growth is liquefying, turning into something hideously toxic for my body. Smells like sulfur, yet it doesn't seem to affect the creatures. The final line there suggests to me whatever is happening is doing so by design. This first section of the level is a mishmash of various themes from episode 1. There's a few props from the cultist locations, a rust organ-esque section, and a few city props like trucks and shipping containers. The vivarium is crumbling. Getting out of the cave, we see we are indeed in the city from the cutscene, and the same features are present. A lore bit under a pile of rock says, "The whole city has become nothing but a pile of debris. The sky is ominous, without color. The air smells of metal. This is not the growth's doing. This is something different." Soon we will have to enter what seems like the rust organs again, and we get a glimpse of growth monsters still being created as they were. All of their structures are crumbling, yet they still keep assembling more forces. Sign of automation, or a new goal? When a question is posed like that, you know the second answer is correct. Previously, the goal of growth was to kill, consume, assimilate. Growth was self-serving, but now it is subservient to something instead. Clicking the button unleashes the small strike team and lets us progress. Winding our way through more rusty halls of blood and bone, the next point of interest is the closest thing we'll come to interacting with another human in this game.
This is an emergency state broadcast program. This is not a live broadcast. Backup system in progress.
The situation here, man, it's totally chaotic. I don't know what I've been telling you, man, but I can't talk about it, or else I'm done.
What do you mean you're done for?
Don't say anything, dude. I still have to find my wife. I know, man. I know. Don't you think for a second that I ain't trying to survive just like you in this shithole, Kevin? As I told you before, I can't talk about it, but to give you an idea, don't! We're barricaded with only a small amount of supplies left. We're soon going to have to leave outside, and we are all scared that they're going to take us with them.
Whoa, I'm trying to understand. Who is gonna take you? Are you really talking about the police or the government? Is it really worth the risk of trying to sneak out during martial law with all that security roaming the streets and the drones? You'll be shot if you get caught, no questions asked.
That's the thing, man. There's so much everyone think it is. Security, drones, even the laws, it all changed. Gone. Even the people. Every living creatures. I saw my friend's cat just bleeding. It
Bleeding?
It just went pop.
What do you mean? It's...
I don't fucking know. The cat just exploded. And there was metal in there.
Right, got it. Thought we were getting a story.
I'm telling you, man, you gotta believe me. Not only that, but that's enough, dude. Shut the fuck up about it. The fuck are you doing, man? Don't do that. You have left me no choice, Brad. They're gonna find us any minute now. They found us. You're gonna get us all killed, you moron. This ends now.
All right, roll commercial. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
This radio, playing on loop a recording of a news broadcast. A presenter is talking with one person trying to relay some information, while another is getting mad at them for making noise. They talk of a martial law imposed seemingly when growth begun its slow invasion in the shadows. However, the person on the radio is now convinced there's something more to this martial law and believes they're being hunted. They're hiding somewhere, and the noise is distressing the other guy, scared that they're going to be found, and shoot the person on the radio with a shotgun. The lore bit on the radio says, "The world outside the city has no idea what's going on. I will end this before they breach the city walls. I live for that single goal now." Unfortunately, I was a little disappointed at this point on my first playthrough. I was under the impression that growth has consumed most of Earth, and organized society is not a thing anymore. Here we have explicit confirmation, only one city has been corrupted, and I'd find it so difficult to believe that the army of whatever country this game takes place in hasn't figured out at all what's happening and reacted with excessive force. Sure, maybe growth has killed everyone that comes close, and there is no direct confirmation of the state of the city, but there's still satellites and other methods of surveillance. The broadcast talks of drones, and we even see jets flying around later in the game, so are you seriously telling me none of them got any visual confirmation that something extremely unprecedented and definitely paranormal has become of the city? How has this location not been nuked yet? This plot hole takes me a bit out of the game, and I find it more immersive to believe the Earth is in a similar state as it is in Doom Eternal. Most of humanity is probably dead, most of Earth is consumed and corrupted, and only small pockets of organized society still exist. Pressing onwards through the familiar machine hell, we actually go back into the ruined city block and drop down this pit full of dead sycophants. A makeshift barricade ahead, signs of struggle, and a single person with a saw blade inside of them. We seem to have found the transmitters of the message. A new weapon inside the suitcase, a triple-barreled shotgun. The lore bit says, the man on the radio seems to have been buying illegal arms. This jawbreaker is custom made. Exceptional work. Seems to be designed for point-blank destruction. Heading back, the pit recesses and breaks open to reveal a fleshy passage downwards, lined with the green lights. And here's another sight we haven't seen before. A passive stone man in its active form with no AI and a red lore bit. For reasons we'll get to later, I believe these are the growth's attempts at communicating with Healer. As to why a stone man was chosen to be the avatar, I have a few ideas. The fact that their attacks have the same properties as the liquefied growth and are only harmful to Healer and not other creatures suggests to me they have some physical ability to interface with them. They feel like the most faceless and possibly oldest creations of growth on Earth, given so far we've only seen them in the closest proximity to the throne. They say, the throne's final command rang true, and so his heralds have come. Those marked by the herald's furious heart shall flee like madmen, and they shall turn to ashes if they were to ever falter in their flight. More than anything, this is a lore-friendly mechanical tip for what's just to come. Leaping further down, another tutorial message pops up, marked by a disastrous flame. The herald's heart must be cut with your blade. Find a way to reach it. Indeed, the herald spoken of is the enemy resting up above, a stationary amalgam of flesh and steel. Anomalies born from growth once its original hive mind had been destroyed. The shattered stone-like substance of their heads indicate that they could be what all the living statues in the old ruins could become one day. Their heart rumbles with growth's own form of electricity, and it seems to be able to weaponize it by concentrating it underneath their victims, resulting in an explosive reaction. The saw blade on its mechanical arm is identical to the sycophant's weapons, implying the growth has begun to learn ideas of iconography as well. The hive mind spoken of is the firstborn, and it's also the same hive mind mentioned in the feral armament bestiary description. I've skipped the description of that creature for now, but we will come back to it later. This one also gives us another reason why a stone man is heralding its presence, and tells us the orange energy is indeed an equivalent of growth's electric current. This final part of the level requires us to run around and flip a bunch of switches, while under constant pressure of explosions coming from the ground. If you stay still for too long, you will get smoked, which is exactly what we were warned of. When the buttons are pressed, a platform rises up, and lets us approach the herald to cut its heart. Also, I didn't notice this while playing, but it seems like getting hit by an attack from the herald caused a little bit of the bloodsteel status effect, further suggesting this is a final form of the stone man. The exit of E2M1 is surrounded by dead creatures we haven't encountered yet, appearing spindly and robotic. E2M2 is Parasitic Relations. Remnants of a place somewhat familiar to me. I feel different from my old self. Too different. These human-made structures are like a distant dream to me now. What remains of home is now being harvested upwards through the great Vivarium pipes. My theory rings true. I am not in the city anymore. This description tells us exactly why these two levels are named this way. Something in the sky has captured and is consuming this fragment of the city. The images of a familiar place show Healer how much he's changed, and this familiar place is the shopping center this level takes place in. This location is particularly crumbling and overflowing with seeping filth. There's parts of it that look like they were going to become parts of a new rust organ, but everything now is being liquidated, like all else. We cut a TV tumor to open a fang gate to progress, and the second passive stoneman has something to say. The first children, they seek our flesh to consume us. We're failing, dying away, yet you carry our mantle, as it was intended. Indeed, as it was always intended. This message is why I believe these interactions are a communication of growth to Healer. Growth is dying and something wants to consume it. But not Healer. He carries their mantle, as someone intended. The other most interesting thing I can say about this section is the 2 Easter eggs. This hidden button unlocks this scene, which I don't know what this is a reference to. There's another hidden key, which opens this recess with an ink ribbon. Interacting with the typewriter does this. The final part of the level takes us through a tube of flesh, where we fight the same enemies we saw dead earlier. They are called sympaths, and I shall read their description soon. There's also 2 abandoned cars, with a corpse nearby, and a note saying, "Despite my failing body, feel a sense of happiness. I have a front row. Witness beyond anyone's imagination. Monsters ignore me now. I could sit here, sleep for a while." It's probably quite self-explanatory. By the way, this note might probably be the easiest lore bit to miss in the game. I have played through the game 3 times, this level 4 times, and I only captured this on video once. This person came here to witness the sight of the next room. Inside this huge cavity is a herald, already attacking us, and the level makes us run quite the gauntlet to hit the switch and lower its platform. Indeed, this is the intake for one of the pressure pipes, siphoning growth from the earth. The level ends when we get sucked in. We are about to find out what the parasite is. The next level is called Death-Filth Medicine. Just like the episode itself, we are about to reveal a ton of information. Gathering space of the dying growth, it seems. This place. A ship? I see figures in the distance, and hear their incomprehensible voices. Everything around me feels and acts just as in their rust organs, yet it looks different. Perfected, shaped with intent. I am now in the belly of the beast, a place wholly unknown to me. My mission still remains unchanged. The throne must be here somewhere. I must kill it. This is the big reveal here. The Malicant are aliens.
No, okay, I'm not saying it's space aliens, right? But it goes without saying it's fucking space aliens!
I'm sorry if you figured this out earlier, and were getting annoyed at me for not bringing this up, but I am an especially dense motherfucker. And on my first playthrough, I wasn't certain, until this description mentioned a spaceship. The aliens grabbed onto a part of the city, the part we've been playing through in the last 2 levels, and are now harvesting the dying growth off of it. Not only that, but their vessel itself is made of growth too. It's as if they are the masters of this fantastic substance, and it does their bidding. The fact that they came here on a ship made of growth already means they must have done this before, somewhere else. Starting the level, we drop down onto a cell of sorts, and come face to face with the devils from space. This particular variant represents the civilians, so to speak, and they are called the flock in the bestiary. The Malicant are old, death-fearing, withering creatures from beyond the stars. Their lives have been artificially elongated, living forever in the cycle of harvesting growth to create their precious medicine for themselves and their mother god. Living under fear of her watchful daughters, they have forbidden emotion, deviating opinion, and eventually their sense of self. Like insects, they live and die to defend this cycle, armed with energy-based chain guns and shotguns. Indeed, the 2 variants seen here have different color schemes, and this is in line with the weapon they wield. The description also talks of a matriarchal ruler of the flock, and we'll soon learn more about her. This also makes it clear why the Malicant needed the throne to be alive. With this new revelation in mind, let's now return to some points I said we'd come back to. Let's start with the description of the stone men. Not much info is available on these rare specimens. The stone seems to be hand-carved, resembling the 3 eyes seen on sycophants and incompatibles masks and in many growth-infested spaces. The throne had been given by the Malicant to the old cult, a sort of cosmic parasite that would eventually devour the world, and these statues may have been ancient representations of the cosmic heavenly visitors. Their crimson projectiles react with healer's body similarly to the toxic substance which growth emits once its hive mind has died, resulting in rapid blood loss to nourish the growth so it may give birth to a new mind, or until a fitting host has been found. The hive mind mentioned in this description, and that of the feral armament, is the throne's firstborn, by the way. I don't really know why the first line would read the way it does, other than to imply the creature in question is someone sentient. But most other creations are being controlled by the firstborn. The text also draws attention to how there's several beings with 3 eyes in this game, and this feature is based off the Malicant, which also proves that I was right in saying the cult did meet the devils. Unfortunately, the description for the throne's firstborn is where things go off the rails. The cult had sacrificed many to the growth, which seeped out of the grafting throne. The Malekith had told them that the grafting throne was a cradle of a god, so it was only natural that the cult felt obliged to feed the newborn. It grew, and the weary, misused slave of the Malekith, that being the throne itself, could not control the growth, which seeped from the throne, yet it managed to implant a single mission to its simple mind: grow, get stronger, protect the grafting throne, so the Malekith may not come back for the grafting throne and enslave it again. After all, even the sky demons fear a titan of its scale. Over the centuries of isolation, the creature became the growth's hive mind, ready to convey his message to all of growth once it would be let free. Maybe this was predestined, as the Malekith had planted the grafting throne on Earth for the sole purpose of letting the growth run free and devour the world for them. Its hideous body was surrounded by the most loyal or most productive members of the cult, kings and queens, holy men, madmen and sycophants alike, who were granted a new body for the sole purpose of protecting the newborn. Let's start with the easy part. I was right in saying these turrets are former cultists. I was wrong in saying the throne controls growth, but then the description also contradicts this by saying it is able to give instructions to its creations. I don't like how some of these passages are written, because they sometimes just don't make much sense. Let's go back to the stone men. To nourish the growth so it may give birth to a new mind. Makes sense, but what about or until a fitting host has been found? Why is drawing blood supposed to help with finding a fitting host for the hive mind? I still haven't figured out what this part is supposed to mean. It would appear part of the cycle of devouring worlds by the Malekith is the creation and death of a hive mind, resulting in the liquidation of growth for harvest. This explains the change between the episodes, but doesn't explain why there is blood sapping growth down the well of sacrifices. I was wondering if this was due to the existence and destruction of a smaller hive mind back in the day, but there is no getting around the fact that the firstborn is the firstborn. Therefore, I think my best hypothesis for now is that these are remnants from before this creature became the hive mind, as the description makes it sound like it took a long time for that to happen. It's also necessary to note that we now know the throne isn't necessarily aligned with the Malekith, but more like a slave or a tool for them. Whether it has a will or not, it's able to act against them to some degree, which is why the firstborn was created, in its mind. I also believe the white sphere that enveloped us in the city in the cinematic from episode 1 was what brought us all up to the ship. Okay, let's get back to the level for now. One of the Malekith flips a switch to drown us in growth, but shooting this glowy thing opens the drain hatch and lets us pass through the pipe. The screen flashes white, as if we'd just discovered a lore bit, and we receive a seemingly telepathic message. Key wielder, my healer, finally. Someone, seemingly on the ship, is glad we found our way here. A bunch of dead flock litter the drain, and we come into contact with those flying enemies again. They are called sympaths, and their description reads: the few truly zealous of the Malekith kin were given a truly heroic duty to keep the sacred harvest vessels' labyrinthian chambers and pipes clean of any growth that could pose their ship any sort of threat. What scraps of growth the Malekith don't use for their medicines, they use its imitative abilities to keep their ancient ships running. Cleaning blades on their arms and a terrifying laser cutter attached to their third eye, they attack anyone who they don't recognize as their kin with animalistic instinct. These creatures are Malekith too, and their role of cleaning out tracts explains why they were the first of their race we had met. They were down in the city, making sure the flow of growth arrives unimpeded. I also think they recognized the person from the car as an obstruction, and that's why that was the first time we encountered them alive. We drop down into a pool of growth and emerge into what is probably a sort of sewer of the ship, or a staging facility, to gather and pack growth into these huge containers. Down in the liquid, it's also possible to find a huge hand emerging from the solid growth, but let's skip that for now. Unlocking the elevator out of here, we encounter a squad of what feels like special forces, the Cherished. Malignant mother gods would be daughters. Their bodies have been altered to give them perfected reflexes, speed and sight, so they can call out the wrong thinkers and intruders alike off their sacred harvest vessel. They wield a deadly sniper rifle and ability to teleport next to their opponent, showing their excellence in long range and close quarters combat alike. They are fast, vicious and evasive opponents, which actually feel quite similar to fight as the Black Ops from Half-Life 1. I wonder what it means to be a would-be daughter though. How can you exist while yet to become a child of someone? I think this is supposed to be taken metaphorically, in the sense that you can be a child to a god. Moving on, the ship we find ourselves in looks quite technically oriented. We don't see any living or communal spaces, everything looks like these abstract corridors and machines, similar to the rust organs, like the description said. We find ourselves yet another kind of floor bit, this one reddish-grey, and looking as if liquid is pouring out of it. The Malnecris blooms, free of the dead old mind's control. Its fury unbound and aimless, the Malicant cannot contain it. Their precious medicine is given only to their mother god now. You might notice something very concerning. This is all a bunch of information Healer has no way of knowing, and it's written as if this was someone else's words. This brings us to the very uncomfortable question I did not want to have to consider. What the fuck even is a lore bit? Throughout episode 1, we've only seen the green variants. These are pretty clearly Healer's observations and thoughts, as they're both in first person and also written with only his knowledge in mind. This seems to be a respiratory system. The last records were from the 1700s. When they're not, they're things he's reading directly off of something. Therefore, I kind of just assumed a lore bit isn't anything physical in the actual world. It just represents Healer looking and thinking of something, or reading. This was challenged in episode 2, when I saw the red variants. They're pretty clearly messages from growth, possibly conveyed telepathically, or maybe even the Stonemen are actually talking to Healer. Now we find this yet another grey and drooping variant. It doesn't seem to be the growth's words, as the red lore bits never mentioned the Malicant by name, and talked of it as some mysterious, unknown force, and these do. If they aren't Healer's words, then how are these being relayed to him? If it was the same telepathic messages from before, I wouldn't think this would be a different entity in the world. This isn't just a stylistic change, by the way, as in this very level, we go on to find more green lore bits that are still clearly just Healer's thoughts. Anyway, as for the actual contents of this lore bit, the Malnecris is just what the Malicant call growth. It says the death of an old mind caused it to be unshackled, and now it does as it pleases. As a result, the ship, which is made from growth, is starting to crumble. What is this dead old mind? I don't think it's the firstborn, mostly because it feels like growth as an organism seems to work pretty slowly. It took it 6 months to devour a city, and even that wasn't enough for a complete transformation. Admittedly, we don't really know how much time has passed between the 2 episodes, but it doesn't feel to me like it was enough for the ship to change so much, compared to what we've seen so far. Therefore, I believe the dead old mind is something completely different. The ship is strewn with corpses of the flock, growth blooming out of their bodies, reflecting the lore bit. It's as if so many are dying that the living can't keep up with disposing of them. Leaping through this very unsafe shipping area, we arrive in a location very much taken over by growth, and fight some familiar monsters. A green lore bit on this 3-eyed sculpture tells us what we've already been seeing. All of the ship seems to be molded from growth. Everything is barely intact, verging on collapsing upon itself. Its figures seem to mock them. We will have to fight our way through some more Malicant opposition before arriving at this locked gate. To open it, the control room must be accessed, but on the way there, we find another lore bit on the corpse of this creature. No signs of life on these ones. Their skin is dry and flaking all over, turning to dust. Given that these individuals were not just discarded, and the bodies aren't blooming in the same way as those we've seen so far, it would appear this is what happens when the flock don't get their medicine and growth doesn't take over them. Beyond this gate, we find what they've been keeping sealed, another telepathic message, the Malnekris Concentrator Hall, such pretenses of sanctity, desperate acts in the name of their mother god. From the pyramidal structure, red liquid seeps. It doesn't drain our blood, so I would make the assertion this is the final result of their medicine creation process, and the flock statues make it look like this is where their mother god would dispense the medicine for her servants. Indeed, the most central of the lot is the Matriarch herself. The love of their Matriarch instilled them with deep despair, an everlasting life of misery, so they feed her their worlds, so she may be rebranded. The way I interpret this lore bit is that eternal life is a curse, so the Malekith make and use the medicine for a greater purpose, which will come to be complete one day. The pyramid also looks very much like the one we've seen in the episode 1 finale cutscene, and is what the entire ship looks like. This lore bit is grey, by the way, and I also just realized I will probably have to be specifying from now on what variant each lore bit is, which I'm sure will not make the script flow even worse than it already does. Moving onwards, I want to restate how similar the aesthetic feels to the Rust Organs. The color palette and lighting is different, but the winding corridors and haphazard placement of rooms and objects is very much familiar. In this place, we see the Malekith and growth monsters fighting side by side for the first time. A green lore bit on this clinker cage reads, "The beasts ignore the ship's masters entirely. Programmed to harvest human life for their hive mind, they remain utterly blind to the others." Not much to add here, so let's move on to another growth-infested zone. The force fields overlook a hall with this heart-looking organ of sorts. Healer remarks, "Its presence seems to be revitalizing and animating the growth beyond their control. Is this the core of the pyramid?" Wherever we are not actually inside the pyramid from which medicine seeps, so I believe this heart is a core part of the entire ship's growth-related systems. Dropping down into this hall, it is guarded by pustules and sycophants, which at first glance didn't really make sense as to how they would be here. Remember, they are normal humans with growth-born equipment. But then I realized maybe this isn't that far-fetched. A human did make it almost all the way to the pipe we entered the ship through. Maybe they were also a would-be sycophant? Defeating this not very imposing defense force and cutting open the organ spills out a huge amount of blood or some other growth-adjacent substance before opening the gates and letting us proceed down another tract for material transport. Swimming through all this liquid spilling out from the heart, some bars are all that separates us from this huge aquatic creature, making its way through the pipes. The way up opens back to the concentrator hall, and now we can access the self-destruct trigger for this unholy machine. I should probably stay away from it, the game tells us, before the pyramid explodes like an actual nuke. We must now swim down the very same path taken by the fish monster to finish this level. As you have probably deduced, the next level is a boss fight, the Death-Rot Child. A new unexpected presence has revealed itself to me, a distant and weak voice speaking through my new body. Healer, it called me, the key wielder. I felt it guiding me to sabotage this Malekith's precious medicine machine. I now find myself in a desolate part of the ship, abandoned to the wildly spreading growth. It seems they don't have much control over it anymore. Something stalks me in these depths now. Depths. How depths.
Depths.
How did they say it so casually? I cannot. Depths. I don't know if that's good. Fuck it. Depths. Something stalks me in these depths now, and I doubt it will let me pass through peacefully. The most interesting information from this description is that we are being subtly manipulated and controlled by another character. This level consists of us traversing further parts of what seems like a system used for the transportation of fluids, maybe a sewer. Making our way to the platform on the top, the blood starts boiling, and the death-wrought child emerges to fight us. These statues seem to depict Malekith bringing something to the Matriarch, symbolically of course. The fish periodically emerges from the depths, and showers us with similar projectiles to that of the pustules. There is very little room to maneuver, so the fight is challenging indeed. When the health bar reaches 0, the monster flees, the blood stops boiling, and the platforms crumble. We must now face the creature in its natural habitat, and we are now the fish out of water. Or, I suppose, the human in the water? The new aquatic mines and lasers spewed out are tough to negotiate, but when we deplete the health again, the child emits a cloud of ink to disorient us and breaks through some pipes to escape. To end the level, we must follow it through. The monster is not dead, and there is no way to properly kill it, as far as I'm aware. Can you believe we're only about halfway through the episode? The winding tracts of filth spit us out in transitory termination. The pitiable creature cries as it scurries away. So be it, my journey continues on its tracks. A wall of suffocating heat hits me as I exit out of the sewers into a factory engulfed in ash and fire. Below they burn the bodies of their own kind, while a great machine above is being fed more and more of their precious growth. The entire level is largely a mirror of the rust organs set on the ship itself. Nothing can go to waste. The growth production is augmented by the Malekith's biomass as well. Near the start, there is a secret down another sewer of growth where a group of incompatible are stuck in what appears to be a chunk of the old cult grounds, torn out from its original context. I don't see how else these terrestrial graves could have gotten here. Unlocking our way into the industrial facility of cinders and death, we are first confronted by a sentinel, the same enemy that stopped us back in episode 1 from killing the throne. It's one of my favorite fights in the game, mostly because the music goes absolutely bananas here, and the way this mini-boss moves and animates feels appropriately chaotic and fast. If I had a nickel for every banger mini-boss that's a chunky unholy paladin wielding a big bell as both a hammer and a casting tool, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. A new mechanic is introduced here. We can use the spear saw's primary attack to parry the bell swings, leaving the sentinel stunned for a brief moment. It's nowhere near necessary to beat this fight, but it feels as natural as it is satisfying. This leaves us with the uncomfortable question of why weren't we able to defeat them back in episode 1? And the answer is... Oh look Kitty, oh my god, hi! Death is considered unnatural and a flaw to the Malekith. The Sentinel were created to forever guard their mechanical catacombs, to keep their deceased safe so they may one day be brought back to life. This was one of the many promises of their mother god. None will be left behind. They would always find a way to defeat death itself. The Sentinel wield an unnatural power, which reacts to the resonance of their great bell. It paralyzes growth, so that their dead may never sprout its flowers and pollen. Without their bells, the copious amounts of growth, which the Malekith imbibe daily, would surely awaken and go wild. On their backs they carry long ribbons of brittle papers, filled with names of all those who had fallen and could never be brought back to life, to memorize them and to remind the Sentinel of their duty. It is now clear how the Sentinel incapacitated healer in that cutscene. The bell's magic has a paralyzing effect on growth, which the protagonist harbors. And further still, the flurries of magic attacks being spat out by this enemy do slow us down during the fight, if we get hit. Despite this, the power seems not entirely effective now, as both the ship and the flock are being ravaged by growth. Maybe this is somehow connected to the death of the old mind. Leaving this furnace, we enter the technological hell proper and receive another telepathic message. Above you, there, her obscured new form. Soon fully rebranded, she shall carry a key too. I cannot influence it any longer. The she is the Matriarch, and she is being funneled all of the ship's medicine production capacity for the purpose of rebranding. The voice tells us she is going to have a key as well, almost as if we were in possession of such a key ourselves, and as if that was a defining feature of a rebranded being. What this key is, we shall find out quite soon. A lot of the level blends together in my mind, as it's another winding machine grinder of industrial devices, toiling away in some mysterious way. This is because its purpose is quite similar to that of the rust organs. It's strewn with malignant corpses of the natural and growth-afflicted kind, and even liquefying in these vats. This certainly doesn't seem like the mechanical catacombs they were promised. In 2 spots, we can actually hear furious roars and bangs, probably coming from the Matriarch. Passing through some kind of infirmary, the bodies are being absorbed by growth, and a grey lorbit on one of the spires reads, "The Malnecris now blooms unchecked, their bodies unable to contain it. The throne used last of its powers to aid so many, and to rebrand you." Given this direct address to Healer, I think it is safe to say this particular variant of lorbit represents a message from the same character, communicating telepathically with us. Because who else could it be? The color of the text is subtly different to the green ones, and it matches with the scripted messages we get. That being said, I have no fucking clue what the voice is talking about when they said the throne aided so many. We pass through some sanctimonious looking vestibules to arrive at the rebranding chamber. Terminals identical to the ones in structures of growth, such as the rust organs, are legible to Healer and read Malnecris or growth, concentrated and funneled into a recipient. Process has taken 6 months. Rebranding status, success. A combination code of very poor security brings out the pod. It did not escape me that these yellow effects are the same as those on the burning body from E1M2. I therefore postulate that they represent an attractive force of growth, used to move things or minds alike. Opening the pod reveals her, a grotesque yet powerful creature. She grows the blade, in a manner reflecting what we saw in the intro cutscene. Looking back at it now, it is easy to recognize scenes from the Malignant ship, and these visions of the Matriarch statues as well, as rebranding. Since the blade only appeared in front of our eyes, we can infer that was a mere premonition. She lashes out in hatred, and the automatic alarm detects damage to the systems and brings her away. We are left flooded with a response force, but we cut through it all the same, as we have done so far, and we get another message. She now wields it, the key. Now she, too, seeks the throne. Come to me, seek me, Healer. It is clear, a defining feature of rebranded beings is the bone blades they grow, which is also a special key for something. The Matriarch is now on her way to the throne, somewhere on the ship, and we must pursue her, onwards to the Ruptured Idol. As I enter this section of the vessel, I am suddenly hit by a wall of unseen power. A disturbing yet nostalgic feeling racks my body. The same indescribable crushing presence that we all felt down in those ruins 6 months ago. The grafting throne is here, very close. The blade in my hand resonates with its presence and pulls me forward. Their mother god seeks the same thing as I, then we shall meet at the throne's chamber. This level has us follow in the Matriarch's footsteps towards the throne. The locations here are less brutalist and almost feel like parts of a spaceship built by humans. In the start, we enter a small R&D facility in which we find this final weapon of the game. The Omen Strike looks very much like a demonic version of the Gauss cannon from Doom 4 and functions similarly too. The orange energy unmistakably portrays it as a growth-born instrument. You can also find it in a secret in the previous level, but I skipped it because it makes more sense to be here. We must follow the rail systems taken by the Mother God to get to the throne room. A lot of the level feels like nothing we haven't seen before, but there are a few points of interest. Here is the location where the pod ended up, and the green Lorbit on this panel says, the Matriarch's transit ended up here. She is being led through her quarters to the chamber of the throne. Further along, we find what seems to be a bridge for the entire ship, with a schematic of the vessel. This seems to be projecting the ship's schematics. If the bottom is the Vivarium, it seems that this place was designed solely for harvesting growth. Indeed, the spherical shape is definitely part of what was transported for consumption. There's also 3 TV panels showing locations from the Vivarium and the Grey Lorbit. The harvesting grounds, now a grave for many lost worlds. For such heavy costs, she promised them unification, love, the throne itself. We eventually find the switch to unlocking the throne room, but that's only part of the puzzle. We must descend down into this maintenance section to progress further. The Matriarch's throne room is grand and epic, but with a rotting secret. The Death-Filth child has made its way here and now lies decapitated, with huge scratch marks on the floor. 2 Lorbits here. He was to be just like you, a blade wielder, next in line, ascension through blood. Wollard. Bro, did I write this? This is exactly how I would say it. Wollard devouring to become what I am, a dweller of the throne. Her son was first to be rebranded, the key just in his reach, God in making. He surpassed her, and so sparked deep jealousy. He was abandoned, never to be seen by their kin again. Okay, that's a lot. Let's try to wrap our heads around this. First of all, the revelation that the voice speaking to us is a rebranded being too. And they also call themselves a dweller of the throne. It would appear the key of rebranded beings allows them to access something inside of the grafting throne. Let's now come back to the bestiary description, for the Death-Filth child to learn more about them. The Matriarch was obsessed with the process of rebranding, by combining fresh and purified growth, or malnecris as they call it. With a young and healthy specimen, they may create a so-called key wielder. All rebranded grow a blade, and the blade is a key to the world within the grafting throne. Rebranded, first of a new species, may then take the true throne within its world to control the grafting throne and create life as mortal gods. The Death-Filth child was the only biological child of Matriarch. He was exposed to experimental and extreme forms of technological rebranding at young age, but as the child rapidly matured into a perfect rebranded creature and sprouted the blade, she felt immense jealousy and cast the child into the ship's labyrinthian sewer system, never to see his kin again. She now knew that the process would work and took his place in the rebranding. The child's form resembles that of Kitty's species, an echo deep from the growth and the countless species which were devoured for their greed. This is quite self-explanatory and tells us completely new information about the nature of the throne. It is possible for rebranded beings to enter inside and then control it, if we go all the way back to the description of the healer. It is now clear someone was controlling the throne when the protagonist got rebranded, given the voice seemed pleased to see us arrive at the ship, and also how it was subtly controlling us all this time. I would speculate it is that character, whoever this belongs to. As far as that last paragraph, I should refer all the way back to the pustule's description. It made reference to how the form of that being is reminiscent of some humanoid, yet not human creature. I inferred from this that this creature was the flock, because what other humanoid yet non-human thing could it have been? However, upon further reflection, they look absolutely nothing alike. The closest thing I can think of that looks kind of similar is the feral armament. They both have underdeveloped or crippled lower bodies and use their arms for stabilization and orientation. However, this is probably not what was referred to. The boss is clearly based on a human, so if the pustule is based on the feral armament, that still means its form comes from humans. When I was fighting the Death-Filth child, I noticed how the projectile attacks are the same as those of the pustules, but the organism doesn't look very similar either. However, its description kicked open the door to speculation of what other possible worlds the Malekith could have consumed, and the biological templates growth has absorbed. Therefore, my best guess as to what the pustule is supposed to look like is some unknown humanoid alien species previously harvested. As for the creature in this room, I cannot tell you why it decided to come here. However, I can tell you that the reason it's dead is because the Matriarch is seeking to enter the grafting throne and eliminate all beings that could possibly compete for the power she lost. She's so close to achieving her goal, after all. Now feels as good a time as any to read her bestiary description. An immeasurably old queen of the Malekith and godmother of their cosmic fleet, it was her plan to plant the grafting throne into inhabited planets to turn its people into growth. By harvesting the growth and purifying it, the Malekith can create near-endless stockpiles of their medicine, which ensures that none of them may die from old age nor sickness. Yet most of it was given directly to Matriarch and her daughters, subjects modified to mirror her beauty and wisdom. I believe those are the cherished. Presenting herself as a benevolent leader, she got her people to join her crusade against mortality, but over the centuries, all have come to know her true face. The medicine was simply a thing to make them follow her, to be dependent on her. She was eventually rebranded, like her son, and it was only a matter of luck that the guardian of the grafting throne on Earth was dispatched by the healer. With the grafting throne and her newly sprouted blade, she had also become the key wielder, and sought to replace her ancestor within its world and become a mortal god herself. Nothing we haven't really seen so far, but there is something pissing me off here. This description makes it seem like the Firstborn was this insurmountable obstacle for the Malekith, which Healer managed to destroy for them. However, the description of the Firstborn itself kind of goes back and forth on whether the existence of this creature was foreseen by the Malekith or not. This seems contradictory, as how would they be able to plan its death if it's such a big problem? Anyway, the way to the throne's chamber has been sealed, and some kind of artifact is required to unlock it. We must make our way through some communal living spaces of the space demons, such as a cantina. You can interact with the switch to dispose some growth food, and one neat little detail here is that pressing it again spills out the excess growth, which prompts a sympath to come clean it up, because that's their entire purpose. We even find a sort of hot tub room and pick up a half-grown throne finger. For whatever reason, this specifically is what unlocks the way forward. I wonder if it's part of the death-wrought child that was removed during the rebranding, but it could be anything. In the same room, a computer panel lets us read some more information. Excerpt from her log. This world has brought ample harvest. The rebranding was a success. Finally, to be able to rebuild it all, perfected, controlled, all in one flesh. No cost is too high. Clearly, this log was made moments before our arrival here, and the key to progress was probably carried by the flock to lock the path behind her. As we descend in pursuit of the Matriarch, we see camera footage of her using the blade to slice open a rift in space. We see the throne is here, and she's about to enter inside. She thinks she has won, but you are stronger than her. Go on, healer, make your incision. Finally, using the blade for its intended purpose, we enter the now Ruptured Idol of worship and power, and what awaits ahead, only God knows. I know we've gone over a lot in the past few levels, and we still have another lot coming up. If you're losing track of what is happening, I will make sure to recap everything once we have all the information. The next level lacks a display name and description. All we get is this image of Healer enveloped in a white light, similar to that radiating out of his eyes. If we toggle the stats, we see it's internally just called Unknown. We start off in a cave, touched in places by growth, and soon witness hordes of these frail beings running at us and exploding if they get too close or upon death. Emerging outside, we view the true face of the throne's pocket dimension, a shattered world of ancient-looking ruins floating above an ocean of what could be Malnekris or blood. One of the first things I noticed this time is these very spires that I'm so glad I brought attention to back in the previous video. They're made of a different material, but the shape is undeniably identical. I still don't think they represent anything particular, but they're not the only thing that will look very familiar. In fact, we also see very human gravestones, along with these sarcophagi, which should ring bells in how they're placed sometimes. And, of course, we still have growth monsters to fight. Monsters such as conservators, which were imitations of the cult's robes. To me, these observations mean that the flow of information between the world outside and inside isn't as restricted as the transfer of living beings. It seems that the growth knows what is happening with the growth outside of the throne, and vice versa. We will even have to be fighting all kinds of Malekith, and all of these enemies spawn with this red thunder. I only have speculation as to what this represents. It could be the throne manifesting valiant life forms as a defense mechanism, or it could be them somehow following us in pursuit, even though they're not rebranded. Honestly, I'm probably not meant to be looking this deep into it. This is meant to be just a fun level in a unique setting. Besides the small explodey enemies, we will also face bigger variants, hurling explosive clots of filth at us. The game calls them Ancient Ones. They have the same model, and the bestiary doesn't differentiate between the two, but let's come back to that later. As we penetrate the caves and the ruins, we reach these two circular structures. The second one harbors more growth than we've seen earlier in the level, along with these sarcophagi sticking out of the walls. At the top is the portal to the true throne. With another wormhole effect, we have reached the Matriarch. Witnessing all of this has only strengthened my sense of self, my purpose. This is what I was made for, rebranded for. The mission I was imprinted with was a faint plea for death. I can only trust that I had been set on the right path. The growth still remains, even if the Malekith and the throne are gone. The Matriarch is here, the last obstacle between me and the throne. She's blind to her imperfection. She too will die, as will the throne. We enter into a thick mist, only able to follow footsteps. We come across the remains of another gigantic creature sliced in half, before finding the other part. It's a huge Malekith, and they're not dead. They raise their head and speak to us. She shackled me, rejecting the throne's true purpose. Without me, and without you, the throne now accepts her. I made you to kill her, to kill me, my healer. So, please, take, giving us an extra life. All I can do now, not a god, merely a pilot, as those before me. We can choose to kill them or not, but it doesn't affect anything beyond this additional dialogue if we do. Thank you. What comes after is up to you. This creature is called the Pilot in the bestiary, and even there it is split apart. The description reads: First of the Malekith, result of a rebranding by its predecessors, proven by the blade on his palm. No records of his life before becoming the mortal god. A pilot of the grafting throne exists anywhere. The Matriarch made sure nobody would remember him. And during centuries of misuse, he finally found a perfect specimen on Earth, and so he rebranded a single human, for the sole purpose of destroying the grafting throne and himself, to put an end to the Malekith's greed. The Matriarch had not foreseen that a being as lowly as human would raise to oppose her will, but the healer was not a human anymore. All life forms which undergo the rebranding process are first of their kind, stronger than those who came before them. The grafting throne doesn't seem to have much of a will of its own. Instead, it is being piloted by a rebranded being. This pilot insists they aren't gods, but bestiary descriptions do call them mortal gods. I interpret this to mean that they aren't truly divine beings, more like mere organisms with great power at their fingertips. The pilot was in control of the throne for all the events in the game, and the first of their kind. This means the throne was previously owned and controlled by a yet another faction before the Malekith. Pilot saw the Malekith's exploitation as evil and chose to end the cycle of growing and harvesting Malnekris by choosing one human, the protagonist, and rebranded them along with giving them a goal. Just like the Firstborn's mission was to protect the throne, it was Healer's to destroy it. This seems contradictory, but the pilots needed the Malekith to not come down and retrieve the throne until Healer had arrived. Let's now go back to the very first description I brought up while discussing the game, and read it in full. That's Healer's, of course. Military scientist, former archaeologist, and war veteran, loner, enjoyer of guns, and a man of bad temper. He was called to examine the newly found ruins of the old cult underneath her home city, with a small team of various famous experts on the matter. For reasons unknown to all, the grafting throne, and who resided within it, used his body in the process of rebranding to create a superhuman killing machine for one purpose: to destroy the grafting throne. A blade grew out from the bone of his forearm, an object of mystery and obsession. An unbending will to finish this mission was implanted into his subconscious. He spent 6 months studying the monsters and learning everything he can about the growth and the cult, and eventually set off to fulfill his mission, telling himself it was simply for the good of humanity. His new form was twisted yet sturdy, disgusting yet perfect for his mission. He would never tire, never feel fear, hunger, nor thirst, and he was allowed to keep his mind and memories to use as fuel for his campaign. An otherworldly energy enveloped his internal structure, glowing out of his eyes, a pale light echoing that which made him. Healer's mission, that he talks of in loading screens and lore bits, was to destroy the grafting throne, but that was not born of his will. It was a literal mission given to him. This is why, as the target was whisked away, a wish for death filled his mind, and the instruction is represented in the first place by the words "kill me" in the opening cutscene. If we go back to one of the messages from Growth in E2M2, they say, "You carry our mantle," as it was intended. It was the pilot's intention, or, more generally, the intention to supplant the mortal gods with newer, more powerful beings. If you've played Doom Eternal, the story of the Matriarch and the flock in general reflects the story of Urdak and the Khan Maker. She was also a ruler of her race, part of a natural cycle of creating new queens to replace old ones. She halted this cycle, and death itself, for herself and the minions, thanks to Argent Energy, a product in the creation of which consumption of worlds by Hell was necessary, including Earth. In this game, we find another, even bigger Maker body in a pool of liquid, which was probably supposed to be the next Khan, now frozen in stasis and eternal obsolescence, and the lesser Makers bound to her will with a hive mind. This is a long shot, but when I saw the giant hand in the waste pool, my mind immediately went straight to this dormant Khan, and given how prevalently it is mentioned that the Matriarch loves rewriting history for her benefit, I wonder if this is the body of another would-be mortal god who harbored aspirations of the throne, who was slain and disposed of here. The only Malekith beings who match its size have been rebranded. This theory doesn't have much supporting evidence in the game, but it's the best I've got. Right, I know this is a lot to get through. This episode of Incision is a fucking doozy. This is what I meant when I said it's lore heavy. I'm sure I've lost many of you by now, but hang in there, soldier. We only have 2 descriptions and 1 cutscene to get through before I present the more digestible recap of everything. Digestible for you. It's not going to be digestible for me, because I'm the one who has to fucking write it. Let's now get to the description of the grafting throne itself. An artifact of unknown origin, possibly from times beyond any cosmic record. Originally, a simple tool to implant life with Malnekris to grant it rapid evolution, or to break down life and create new species from their remains. Within the grafting throne is a world coursing through its veins, formed by its thunderous energy, a sort of projection of a small parallel universe which is and isn't around it all the time. Within the world sits the true throne, an obelisk slab which gives a rebranded being full access to its mechanisms, directly connecting the grafting throne and its new mortal god to the Sea of Malnekris, an ocean of primordial life. The Malekith had no interest in true worship of a deity. The Matriarch saw in their own representative mortal god nothing but a tool to be exploited. The throne was enslaved, for the sole purpose of generating more Malnekris, growth, to fulfill her greed, and became a parasite god which devoured all the worlds the Malekith saw fit for harvesting. The extreme misuse of the grafting throne eventually spawned a crack from which the Malnekris would slowly seep out of, and the faith-blinded religious sect became nothing but a death cult, feeding their crimson god, believing the grafting throne and the growth to be one and the same. A lot of this is things we already know, but this description makes it very clear that growth and the throne are two separate things. Growth is more like the medium by which the throne fulfills its purpose, which isn't death and destruction, but creation of life in a controlled manner. Malnekris exists in the throne, but what the growth does once it's outside is largely out of its control. The fact that it was seeping out of the artifact only after extensive misuse, or, dare I say, abuse, means this isn't the natural modus operandi. Instead, the description suggests that the normal method of implant life with Malnekris is more subtle. Perhaps Healer's rebranding is what it resembles. Anyway, we soon fall through a hole in the ground and drop onto the arena where we fight the Matriarch. This arena gives us a significant boost to the recharge of the Spearsaw special attack. And I get why. The game wants you to have this rebranded on rebranded, blade on blade battle, where your Spearsaw is an extension of you for both parrying and punishing openings. The boss is able to summon phantom projections of herself, possibly resulting from her new control over the growth. However, she, like all before her, falls to Healer's persistence and determination. Behind the arena, we can see what is probably the true throne mentioned in the description, the real seat of power, and the ocean of red below us is probably the Malnekris under its control. When the boss dies, the final cutscene immediately starts. One of the most brutal and gory executions on our foe immediately results in the throne shattering and all the growth spilling out. It fills up the whole ship, before it too explodes, and unfortunately blanketing the city again with filth and decay. And that's the end of episode 2. I will now go over some loose bits I haven't brought up yet, before wrapping up everything together into a cohesive whole. Let's start with the description of the Ancient Ones. Within the otherworld of the grafting throne lies countless graves of ancient mortal gods. Despite the godlike powers one wields as the master of the throne, all will eventually fall victim to time itself. When the growth saw its opportunity to escape through the cracks between the worlds, it weaponized the decaying bodies and filled them with hatred and volatile energy. Their shambling bodies are sturdy and hideous and all share a humanoid form, implying that they are all from the same line of evolution, creations of rebranded beings, who eventually replaced their creator. Okay, I know many of you watching probably aren't really following anymore, but as I'm sitting here writing the script, I myself am struggling to wrap my head around what is happening in this description. Let's start with the easy part. These beings are not Malekith. Probably. They have 2 eye sockets and do look like they could have been human, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are. Secondly, each of them was a mortal god, meaning they were at some point in control of the throne. Third of all, the crack through which growth escapes is probably the crack in the grafted throne. But what about the second paragraph? It says the shared trait of being humanoid is enough to conclude that they share the same evolutionary lineage. Okay. They have the exact same models, so I already concluded that the moment I saw them. Unless they're saying these beings were humans? I don't think this makes sense. The final sentence says that creations of rebranded beings replaced their creator, and unfortunately it is very unspecific as to who are the creations and who are the creators. If the Ancient Ones were humans, that would mean some other race of beings in possession of the throne created them and then were replaced. The Ancient Ones then had to have the throne, and then it would somehow have to fall into the hands of the Malekith, but humans were not replaced. And sure, the cult did have the throne for some time, but it was planted there by the space demons, and there was no talk of any cultists getting rebranded. Besides, the fact that the first Malekith was the pilot up until we came here is contradictory with the fact that the reason the cult exists in the first place is because of the throne being brought down by the Malekith, so the timeline doesn't line up. If anything, it would make more sense that the Ancient Ones are spacefaring beings who created the flock instead, and were replaced by them. I don't think this is necessarily corroborated by what it says in the description, but that's the best I've got. I also wonder if this means the name Malekith comes from Malnekris, and if they are creatures of growth, that would explain why they need growth for their medicine. Okay, I know I've already brought this up before, but the pilot giving us an extra life makes the uncomfortable assertion that these are physical things in the world of Incision, and not just a video game pickup. There's really not many things that have this pale green glow to them. In the other world of the throne, there are these burning vessels, and besides those, there are green accents on things like jump pads and other technological items. Remember this hole back in E2M1? It would be a huge stretch to say these lights are somehow connected to all of this, because they do just look like green lights. However, there is something about this shade that feels like it just fits well within the realm of the gods. The extra lives and the fire is a pretty strong connection in my mind. Not that it matters much. Okay, we're at the final stretch. Let's start wrapping things up now. The timeline that we know of so far looks like this. Eons ago, a race of beings somewhere in space that the game only calls Ancient Ones were in possession of the grafting throne. They might have made it, or might have not. We really don't know where it came from. The grafting throne was a tool that could manipulate life as a force using Malnekris, or growth. It could be used in careful and calculated ways to rapidly create and evolve new life forms, or break them down for further reuse. The way this would work is that the grafting throne generates an otherworld, possibly as an emergent property of the processes within. Not unlike the human consciousness itself, in order to take control of the throne, one would have to undergo rebranding. This is a process that can be performed by the throne itself and causes individuals to grow a bone blade, which is the key for this creature to enter the pocket dimension. Inside, they will find the proper throne and the controls within for it. This doesn't make them immortal, and all of such beings will end up in the ground with time. The amount of pilots who are in control of the throne might be very high, but we know nothing about them. The Ancient Ones probably created the Malekith using this method, and the first of them was rebranded to become the new pilot. The Malekith eventually replaced the Ancient Ones, whether that be by conquest or thanks to now wielding the power of the throne. Either way, they have built a society of order and obedience to the Matriarch. She told them death was a shortcoming, which could be eliminated. By planting the grafting throne on inhabited worlds, it would cause growth to spread and consume biomatter to all become one. When this growth died, it could be harvested, and life-prolonging medicine could be manufactured. And so they built harvest vessels to send into deep space for this purpose. They became entirely dependent on growth and used its imitative properties for construction of their very ships, and probably many more things. However, the real reason the Matriarch wanted the medicine was to undergo rebranding herself. She discovered this process could be performed artificially too, but would require copious amounts of growth. For the purposes of experimentation, her son was the first to be rebranded using this prototype technology. He grew a blade, as expected, and transformed into this aquatic creature, similar in shape and anatomy to Kitty, possibly a reused template from some distant race of beings consumed by growth. A jealousy grew within the Matriarch, for she wanted to be rebranded too, and cast him into the sewer bowels of the ship, never to be seen again. Earth was next to be assimilated, and the Malekith planted the throne, while forming a cult around it, untold centuries ago. The pilot, despite being in control of the throne, was still somehow under the oppression of the Matriarch, and he recognized the evil behind the flock's machinations. He hatched a plan to strike back at the Mother God and end the brutal cycle of death and consumption. A crack formed in the throne, from which growth seeped, due to the misuse and abuse of the former tool, now a cog in the machine. The growth was not under the direct control of the pilot, but he managed to create what would be a throne's firstborn. As far as the cultists were concerned, this being would grow stronger to protect itself from the Malekith coming back for it. Why did he need the throne to stay where it was? Because after the cult dissolved and was buried, archaeologists in modern times uncovered the ruins and the throne. This awakened the machine to get to consumption, but the pilot chose the protagonist of the game to be rebranded. They would turn into a first of their kind, with the mission to kill the Matriarch, the grafting throne, and the pilot. Why did Healer not destroy the throne there and then? I think the manipulator wanted the protagonist to destroy the whole machine, not just a crucial piece of it. For that, they would have to be relocated to a safer place, where they could study the growth which has now taken over the entire city. This is around the time that the Matriarch entered the pod to start the rebranding process herself. 6 months later, Healer is beckoned to go back and fulfill his mission. The events of episode 1 happen. He kills the firstborn for the sake of destroying the throne, but the Malekith were faster. They stopped the protagonist before transporting a chunk of the city and the throne to their vessel. The death of the firstborn, also the growth's hive mind, emits a signal which liquefies the growth. This new form has blood siphoning properties for the purpose of forming a new hive mind. This also makes the substance fit for harvest, and it's what the Malekith have gotten to doing, from the Vivarium using great pipes. This is where the first 2 levels of episode 2 take place, in the crumbling ruins of the city being drained dry. We see 2 red lorbits, which represent the growth's attempts at communication with Healer, but they don't really say anything all that interesting that we aren't about to find out for ourselves. He also observes the growth monsters have a new goal, and that is probably his elimination, or just a general defense of the ship from intruders. In level 3, we manage to board the ship proper, and start getting telepathic messages from the pilot. He guides us through the vessel, making us sabotage the medicine production facility. We will have to get through the Death-Filth Child to progress, and we are victorious, the beast left fleeing for its life. It is obvious, the ship is on the verge of collapse, as the growth it is made of is going wild and spawning its filthy soldiers. This is also the case for the medicine inside of the Malekith's bodies. The pilot leaves us more messages in the form of these grey lorbits for us to learn more about his kind, and one of them mentions the death of something called an old mind as the cause of this chaos. It's not impossible that it was the firstborn, because it was the only thing this could be that we know of, but that would make the timeline very messy, and I therefore doubt it is the case. As we get through and out of a rust organ style facility for the processing of their own dead, we reach the Matriarch herself. She's being rebranded as we watch, and then taken to the throne. We must pursue her, lest she become the new mortal god. She kills her child to eliminate any possible competition, and enters the throne, with us just behind. Fighting our way through the other world, we eventually reach the evil and would-be goddess, to face her and destroy the throne once and for all. This causes all of the growth to come spilling out before destroying the vessel and leaving the ocean of filth on top of the city. This feels like it could be a conclusion to the story, as we're left with no intelligent antagonists, but there's still episode 3 to go over, and we're going to witness things not meant for human eyes. Thanks for watching. And by the way, if you're wondering why Pilot didn't destroy the throne himself. Oh my god, Kitty, hi!